We have Mr. Gurcharan Das, who's joining us all the way from India. I think this is one gentleman who does not possibly need any introduction, possibly one of the most prolific authors that India has seen. He's done, I think, so many books that he himself must have lost count. But I think his work on India, his work on Indian mythology, especially the idea of Kama Sutra and others, like just very, very mind-blowing. A perspective which is so sharp, which is so deep. You did see something yesterday when he was talking about the Jyotirlingas and his deep thinking that actually goes into it. I've had a chance of knowing Mr. Gurcharan Das for many, many years, and he's a true inspiration in many, many ways. But there's something very interesting about his story, and that is that he is somebody who became an author in his second avatar, if I might say. Of course, he's done plays as well. So if you do not know, his first writing was a play, which has now been shown across the world or has been played across the world. And now, if I might say that if there is somebody who needs to be on the list of Gyanpeeth, if I might say, then he has to be there. But now he's getting embarrassed. But a very, very powerful thinker. And I'll invite Mr. Das to really give his talk. So you have 20 minutes, please.
Thank you, Amit. Yes, we're running 15 minutes behind. Sorry, I'm between you and lunch. So the job is doubly difficult. I suspect I was invited here because I wrote the first book that predicted the rise of India in 2000 based on the reforms that had happened. The cynics in Delhi who were surrounding me thought I was smoking, but India has in fact obliged by rising. And I think one of the things that Amit is looking for is, well, what's next? In other words, India has risen. In the last 30 years, the growth rate has been almost 6%. Annual average growth rate when population growth rate has gone down to 0.5. So it's all coming down to the per capita line. India has lifted 400 million people above the poverty line. I'm going by the same Tendulkar poverty line, not Tendulkar the cricketer. And also the middle class, which was 8 to 10% before the reforms, is now around 30% based on, again, apples to apples comparison. So it's a good story. But we have not created the jobs that 6% average annual growth rate should have created. And why? Because we have not created an industrial revolution. We seem to have skipped from Ramesh Chand's Green Revolution to the IT revolution of the Silicon Valley, the digital revolution of the India stack. All wonderful, but how are we going to take people, 45% of the people on the farms, to better lives? It will not be through agriculture. And services, yes, it's not an either-or issue. But I think it'd be very difficult to see those guys going into IT from the farms. So we have to go through that. And as Christian said yesterday, success is not inevitable, and so we'll have to work for it. But the conditions today are far better. Conditions today are the cumulative effect of 30 years of incremental frustratingly slow reform which has been done by stealth, because nobody has sold the market. And Indians still believe that the reforms or the market makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. The Congress party still makes the false trade-off between growth and equity at the drop of a hat. And so we have a problem. But the path is pretty clear, but it's not inevitable. So why did I write this book, India Unbound? I wrote it driven primarily by my experience of the license Raj. Very few of you actually have had that experience. So it's worth taking a minute or two to tell you one example I worked for a company that made Vicks Vapor Rub, an American company. And one year, there was a flu, an epidemic in the country, and we sold a hell of a lot of Vicks Vapor Rub. And we thought we'd done a great job. We were heroes in the eyes of our headquarters. But at the end of the year, we got a summons from the government saying that we had broken the law. And what was the law we had broken? The law said we could produce only so many tons. The license that we had specified the number of tons of Vicks Vapor Rub that could be produced. And breaking the law was a criminal offense with a 3-year jail sentence, maximum 3 years. So I got scared, frankly, when the lawyer showed me this. And I was summoned to Delhi. And I had 2 lawyers with me. And I was made to wait 2.5 hours outside the office of the officer, the joint secretary. And finally, we were let into his office. And we sat down. And he kept reading the newspaper. And he was oblivious of the fact that we were waiting for him. And we were too polite to disturb him. But finally, he put his newspaper down, and he says, "Kya?" And I said, "Sir, you have summoned me. You tell me, kya?" And he says, "ठीक है, मैंने फाइल नहीं पढ़ी तुम्हारी, बताओ क्या है problem?" So I showed him the summons, and he said, "You've broken the law." And I said, "Well, there was a flu, and I thought we were doing our duty during an epidemic to keep the shelves of the pharmacies stocked with our product. And during this period, we've helped millions of families in the country with children. And so we think we did a good job." Talk about the difficulty of being good. I didn't say that. And then he says, "But you broke the law." And he says, "You guys in the private sector are all crooks. And especially you multinationals. You think you can get away with anything? I'm going to make an example of your company. And now the law will take its course, so jao." So he asked us to go out. And of course, I got scared. The lawyers were shivering. And as we were walking out, I don't know what got into me, but I turned around and I said, "Sir," this news will get out. It's not every day that an executive of a company goes to jail, and it will be an international news because we are an international company. And he says, "Are you threatening me?" I said, "No, I'm not threatening you. I'm only telling you I don't even have to leak the news. It'll come out." And I said, "How do you think the world will look at us? That here was a company that was doing good for the people during an epidemic, and you've sent them to jail." And he says, "Jao." So I went, and I went really scared. The lawyer said to me, "You fool, you should have begged for mercy, fallen on his feet." And here you were saying what will appear in the New York Times and all that. But basically what I had said was, what will the world think of a law of our country which punishes people for doing good, for producing for the country? Anyway, the story's over because the government quietly dropped this whole case. But I was left with scars. I had been a socialist. Within a month, I joined the Swatantra Party, and I became a liberal. Not only a liberal, but a libertarian, which is an extreme liberal, which believes that the state is a second-order institution. Market is a first-order institution. Anyway, so the fact is that in those 40 years in the name of the poor, we enacted this command economy, and we sacrificed 2 generations to missed opportunities for the young. And that's why we really got our freedom, not in 1947, but in 1991. 47 we got political freedom, but economic freedom we won in 1991. Anyway, that's the background. But after I saw, India obliged by rising thanks to the reforms, I noticed that people there, yes, prosperity was spreading in India, but happiness was not. And why? It's not the usual debate about being rich and being happy. But what was failing us was governance. And particularly in the second part of the UPA 2, it was really disgusting, the corruption that swept over the country. The Anna Hazare movement, etc., you may all remember. And so I wrote the second reason why Amit has invited me, which is I wrote a book called India Grows at Night, but it was originally titled India Grows at Night When the Government Sleeps. But my publishers thought that was a bit insulting, so we'll drop the second half. And essentially it was about why do I have to wait 12 years for justice in India, which I would get in other places in the world in 2 years or 3 years? Why what we talked yesterday about enforcement of contracts. Why is that a problem? Police. I said, talk about judiciary, police. Why? I'm a privileged person in India, living in Jorbagh, and I'm afraid to go near the Lodi Road police station. And why is the police the handmaiden of the chief minister? and going after opposition people at the behest of the chief minister. Why it should be autonomous? There should be an autonomy in the police. So we've talked about judiciary, police, third pillar of governance, parliament. Why are 1 out of 4, now 1 out of 3, members of parliament with a criminal record? In fact, criminals enter parliament because they feel they can slow down the process. And why are we always in an election mode in the country? Why can't we have over 5 years, once every 5 years, national elections and halfway state elections at one go? Anyway, these are, and the final one is the bureaucracy. Why does a person, an officer, highly effective officer who works, this is a true story. In fact, very close to me are these two people, the same batch, very senior officers today, I won't name them. One of them works 14 hours, a day, and he's keeping the country afloat. The other one works 2 hours a day, and the rest of the time he's politicking around. And they will get promoted on the same day. And they are neighbors. And I ask myself, how demoralizing for someone, for an organization, to have this kind of an incentive system. And goes back to the lack of accountability, etc. Anyway, so these are the governance issues which I try to address in India Grows at Night when the government sleeps. And I gave the example of 2 cities, 2 towns on the border of Delhi, Gurgaon and Faridabad, and how everybody put their bets in the 80s on Faridabad. It had an industrial estate, rich agriculture, direct line to Delhi, a railway connection to Delhi, and it had a municipality. And Gurgaon had nothing. It had no even agriculture, it was a rocky soil. Even the goats ran away. Forget about industry. And then, my God, 10 years later, Gurgaon had become Millennium City, 40 million square feet of commercial space. A large number of India's multinationals had moved there, famed apartment complexes that were better than Singapore or Hong Kong, and it had 5 golf courses, countless malls. And why did that happen? And everybody's bet on Faridabad. Faridabad was nowhere. And why? Because there was nobody to stop KP Singh and DLF and other guys from, there was no municipality, so there was no permissions. There was no municipality, no officers. So that's where the story, India's story in some ways, was a story of private success and public failure. And that was the main, thesis of that. And today, when Christian tells us that success is not inevitable, we have to remember that not only do we have to create an industrial revolution still, and as I said, much better conditions today. We've heard here, road mileage has doubled. Port handling capacity from 91, port handling capacity, since 2011, port handling capacity has quadrupled. Logistics are 40% better today. And we are finally one country. All the friction of having depots in every state, that's gone. And and all the other reasons that you are, the digital revolution, my God, that's the greatest thing that we've been hearing. So I think certainly the the conditions are there. But if we want to achieve that 2047 objective that Mr. Modi has given the country of becoming developed, we're not going to achieve it unless we also fix governance. And we will fall, just as China will never become truly developed unless it gives freedom to its people, so India will not get fully developed, even if we create the Industrial Revolution, unless we fix governance. We'll get caught in some kind of a middle income trap. And so really, that's kind of the other problem, by the way, which we are not aware of, is that nobody has sold the reforms. I mean, I blame Manmohan Singh, I blame Narasimha Rao, I blame Vajpayee. All these were reformers. But they never sold the reforms, and we're still reforming by stealth, chupke chupke, raat ko, you know? So we can learn something from Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher used to say that she spent, my 20 minutes are not, I've got 2 minutes more. Margaret Thatcher used to say, I spend 20% of my time reforming and 80% of my time selling the reforms. And so what she did was she actually changed not only her party. In India, these guys didn't even change the Congress party, these reformers of 91. She changed the bureaucracy, the mentality of the bureaucracy. We haven't done that. And we haven't sold it to the people. People still think rich get richer, as I said earlier. So that is an unfinished job. Deng did it more. He wasn't even dealing with a democracy. He was selling reforms in China. Anyway, the problems we have today, a lot of them can be traced to the fact. You know, I grew up in my early years in America, and I went to an American high school, and we used to do civics. It was required. And they used to sell their constitution every day. And nobody has sold the constitution. Unfortunately, Nehru tried, but he was too much of a Western-oriented gentleman, and he could not connect with the people. Unfortunately, Gandhi died too soon after independence, because Gandhi had started doing that. Gandhi had connected with the people by selling the same ideas of the constitution, liberty, equality, but through the language of dharma, the civilizational language. And I think the entire political class has failed in that respect, that people still believe that the Constitution kind of fell from the sky one day, and it's not ours. They don't believe it's theirs. So a lot of our problems, governance problems, etc., are due to this. And the Constitution is not laws. Constitution is a moral document. You know, P.V. Kane, who's one of my heroes, we won the Bharat Ratna, by the way, a Sanskrit scholar, he called the Constitution a Dharma Shastra. It's a moral document. And so why today the excellent ideas of liberalism, secularism, why are they failing us today? And I feel that in a sense, because we have not had a dialogue, we meaning the guys the 2% who have ruled the country, the English-speaking elite, they also have to share the blame. And in fact, to me, the rise of Hindu nationalism, Hindu Rashtra, goes partly to this issue of people, a resentment that here we are, a country, 75 years after independence, All the serious business, both in the private sector and public sector, is done in English, when only 7% of Indians are fluent in English, and about 15% have, in various degrees, some kind of comfort with it. But if someone from the 85%, a bright young person, came into this room, that person would feel deaf. Imagine feeling deaf in your own country. And so that failure, I'm not recommending we should make Hindi, by the way, a national language. I'm just talking about explaining why secularism has failed and why, because we never had a dialogue with tradition the way Gandhi did. Now he has got up, so I better behave.
Now he's really shutting you down.
Yeah. So anyway, the only last thing is, if anyone who can do this today, this job of selling the reforms, etc., and having this kind of dialogue, is the Prime Minister. We've never had as popular a leader after Nehru as he is. And in fact, once he invited me, maybe out of absent-mindedness or what, he asked me, well, what should I be doing? And I talked about this. And I said, use Man Ki Baat, that wonderful radio program once a month on Sundays. It comes at 11 o'clock in the morning. And the whole country is glued to it. I said, sell the reforms, sell the Constitution in your Man Ki Baat. And he said, yeah, give me a one-pager. And so he did do once, but it has to be a constant thing. Anyway, Amit, sorry to have, my talk is over now.
Thank you.
Mr. Das, I wanted to ask you, so India is now coming upon a 100th year anniversary, centenary of the RSS, which is a deeply, cultural / an institution that is deeply woven into the Indian fabric, not just of the BJP. It has its roots in Indian freedom struggle. What do you see? And it is so huge and it's so prolific. It's already there. Why are we not using it as an institution or as a cultural element that has such deep ties into a non-English speaking India?
Yeah.
Why are we not leveraging it more?
This is a very loaded question. I better be careful. I hope no journalists here, no one's going to report this. All right. The fundamental issue is that we don't want religion to be introduced into politics. I hope everybody agrees with that. We don't want India to become a Hindu Pakistan. And so the reality is that, yes, RSS is a great organization, and that's one of the reasons why they keep winning. They're much more disciplined, much better organized, etc. And it has good qualities, and so on. But what we needed at that point, in the first 40 years, was a dialogue with the RSS. Instead of course, you sent them to jail, after Gandhi's death and all. But nevertheless, there could have been a dialogue. So I believe, though, that fundamentally, the life of Hindutva the shelf life of Hindutva is limited. Mainly because it goes against the temper, the liberal temper I talked about yesterday, the liberal temper of the country. And I think if actually the economy were to really turn down, we've been lucky, as I said, we've had a good ride over 30 years, and even this period today, we are the fastest growing economy. But if, God forbid it does, but if it were to turn down, I tell you, it's not Hindutva that is keeping the government in power. It's a lot of other things that we've talked about in the last 2 days.
Okay, so we'll just take two questions
Yeah,
together,
sorry.
please.
Yes. So you mentioned actually classical liberalism, in fact, and on that note, that what do you see as the potential to draw upon the probably the closest India had to classical liberalism was the Swatantra movement back in the 50s. Might that form the kernel of some what we can call a silent majority that right now is just being overlooked because of much of noise in the media and such? Do you see much of a prospect for that?
So I'm not sure if I've understood your question
Like
very
silent
well.
majority. So what would be the prospects
Of the liberalism.
creating a coalition
Of liberals.
founded, yes, so
Yeah.
as a silent majority?
Yeah.
We'll just take this question and then we'll close.
Yes, I'll come to you. It's a very good
So that
question.
was a really nice address. I had a question on your tale of two cities, Faridabad and Gurgaon. It came out, I must have got it wrong, it came out as if you are characterizing Gurgaon as a success. Do you see it as a success?
Let's discuss that over lunch.
Okay.
Perfect.
But the question that he raised is, what are really the prospects of a liberal party? And Swatantra is dead, and I think there's zero prospect. I think there's a zero prospect of a liberal getting elected. A liberal is unelectable. And frankly, the dilemma of the Indian liberal is also that he has no one to vote for. He can't vote for Modi for social political reasons, and he can't vote for the Congress because Congress is always risking making this false trade-off between growth and equity still.
Great. Thank you, sir. Let's break for lunch and let's be back in 30 minutes, please.